In any case, my name is Alessandra Galloni. I'm the global news editor of Reuters news agency. And the panel before us now is about how businesses are taking a lead on social and environmental issues. We have a truly star-studded panel here because we have three top executives at three global companies. We have Gary Coombe, who is the president of Procter Gamble Europe. We have Antoine Frérot, who is the chairman and CEO of Veolia. And we have Lisa Jackson, who is the vice president for environmental affairs and social initiatives at Apple Inc. So three global companies that operate globally. And I hope that in the discussion, they will tell us how they're taking a lead with a lot of specifics, but also the business case. Because as we were saying before in the back, it's one thing to be the Red Cross, and we all love the Red Cross, but when you're a business, you have to balance environmental and social initiatives with your shareholders. And that's what I hope that we will talk about today. So our first I'm going to call them up one at a time. And the first one will be Gary from Procter Gamble.
Thank you.
Welcome. So let's start. I know you have something to show us all. I'm not sure where it's going to be projected, but you have something to show us all. So can you give us a panorama of what your company does? Obviously, you make what most of us use every day. And it's a huge company, a huge brand, and therefore it is incumbent on you to lead the way, also as a global brand with consumers, with your sourcing, with your supply chain as well. So could you give us a panorama of what Procter & Gamble does, and then perhaps we can see your video?
Yes, it's a broad topic, but let me say to you at the start that this year P&G is celebrating its 180th year, and we intend to be around for another 180 years at least. So in areas of social and environmental responsibility, we take a long-term view, and I'm absolutely certain we wouldn't have been around for 180 years if we hadn't had these truly embedded in our business and commercial operation for many, many years. To give you a taste of the sort of things we engage on, perhaps start with environmental responsibility. We're a big consumer goods company, so that's very important to us. We have, for example, signed up to some very stretching environmental goals. And I should say, incidentally, that even though there are some nations who maybe are backing off some of those goals, we remain fully committed and feel as a global company we can make a difference. So, for example, we're reducing greenhouse gases by 30% over a 10-year period, ending 2020. We have many manufacturing sites around the world. I'll take Europe, my region, 33 manufacturing sites, and all of them will be zero waste to landfill by 2020. So, in fact, 27 of them already are. So just an essence, a sense, if you like, of and some examples of how seriously we take environmental issues. I guess what I would say, though, is that we've realized that as a company, both in terms of environmental and social issues, we can do a lot. We're a big company and we do a lot. But we've come to realize that through the power of our brands, we can do a great deal more. We have 25 brands worth $1 billion or more, and we reach 5 billion consumers on the planet, the majority of the population. And we've realized progressively that with those brands, we really can make a difference, influencing culture, stereotypical norms, in the environment, and many other aspects.
How do you mentioned, obviously, you source from from all over the world, and you have manufacturing sites all over the world. There's increasingly attention, and you cited the Paris Accord. Even I imagine you're speaking about the Paris Accord and the fact that some, not everybody is doing perhaps what we originally thought they might. How do you go beyond, since you have such a presence nationally in different countries? How do you go beyond even what governments are able to do these days?
Well, in terms of sourcing, we have a number of initiatives in place that we think make a big difference. Transparency of ingredients and transparency of sourcing is incredibly important now. In fact, if I take a step back, brands like ours, everyday brands like ours, for many years were able to survive and do well based on the delivery of a functional benefit. And that's no longer the case. Consumers rightly demand much more of the brands that they buy. These brands need to have a point of view on social and environmental issues and also be demonstrably doing good work in those areas. And of course, supply chain and ingredients are a big part of that. Many examples I could talk about. Perhaps I'll talk about one from France, being as we're in France today. Head & Shoulders, which is the biggest shampoo brand in the world, launched a variant last year made entirely from beach plastic. That was not an easy thing to do. It took a lot of important partnerships, actually finding beach plastic, getting it into the supply chain, manufacturing it properly, and making a bottle. It's easy for me to say that. It's actually quite a complex thing to do. We're very proud that we did that, the first ever recyclable shampoo bottle made of beach plastic.
How much do you spend, how much of your research and development is focused on issues like this one?
Well, it's hard to break it out because it's not a subsidiary function. It's embedded in the business process of everything that we do. Every brand has to have a program of ever-improving environmental and social progress. It's part of the DNA of all the brands. I referenced this before, but we've progressively begun to realize that moving away from environmental sustainability and thinking about social issues, our brands have an incredibly powerful voice. You mentioned, Alessandro, that I have a video. Maybe we could play that in a moment. But this video demonstrates how brands, and this is a brand called Ariel, and a laundry detergent brand. Many people would be familiar with it. This was a video made for the Indian market, but it went globally viral. It's been watched by consumers in over 25 countries. And it's set out to tackle the very deep-rooted gender stereotype issue associated with doing household tasks, which exists in many nations around the world, but is particularly acute in India. If we could play the video, you'll see.
Let's play the video.
Nana, ये देखो, leg, helmet.
होमवर्क हो गया?
मम्मी, ये देखो.
फिर दाग लगा दिया. पापा ये लीजिए आपके घर जाने की टिकट. Hello, yeah, I'm just going to send you the email in 5 minutes. Yeah, give me 5 minutes. I'm working on the present.
मेरी छोटी सी गुड़िया
Okay.
कितनी बड़ी हो गई. घर घर खेलती थी, अब घर संभालती है, ऑफिस संभालती है. आई एम सो प्राउड एंड आई एम सो सॉरी. सॉरी कि ये सब तुम्हें अकेले करना पड़ता है. सॉरी कि जब तुम घर घर खेलती थी तो मैंने तुम्हें रोका नहीं. ये नहीं कहा कि ये सिर्फ तुम्हारा काम नहीं है, तुम्हारे हस्बैंड का भी है. पर कहता भी कैसे है.
और मेरी ग्रीन शर्ट धो देना.
मैंने भी तो कभी तुम्हारी मम्मी की हेल्प नहीं की, और तुमने जो देखा वही सीखा. तुम्हारे हस्बैंड ने भी बचपन में यही देखा होगा. घर घर खेलते वक्त वो टीवी देखने की या न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ने की एक्टिंग करता होगा, और तुम जैसी कोई छोटी सी लड़की चाय बनाने की एक्टिंग करती होगी. उसके डैड की तरफ से सॉरी, तुम्हारे डैड की तरफ से सॉरी, और हर उस डैड की तरफ से सॉरी जिसने कई सालों से एक गलत एग्जाम्पल सेट किया. पर अभी भी देर नहीं हुई. इस सॉरी के साथ मैं अपनी तरफ से एक छोटी सी कोशिश करूंगा कि घर के काम में मम्मी की हेल्प करूं. किचन का किंग ना बन पाऊं तो कम से कम लॉन्ड्री में तो हाथ बटाऊं. इतने साल एक गलत एग्जाम्पल सेट किया है, अब कुछ सही कर जाऊं. तुम्हारा पापा.
Now, Gary, tell me the truth. Did you really do this for India, or did you do this for this conference? Because it seems particularly apt.
Well, if I'd done it for this conference, I will tell you it's had over 50 million views, so it was quite some preparation. You know, I was listening to the previous debate, which I thought was fabulous, incidentally, and you know, my point of view is that the gender equality progress still has a long way to go. That issue still has a long way to go. There are too many women denied healthcare versus men, denied education versus men, denied the same pay for doing the same job. I know many organizations, and I like to think P&G is one of them, is leading the way in doing good work, but if you take a global view, there is still a lot of work to do. And what we've discovered, and this is why it's something that we're driving, you know, our brands can have a profound effect on tackling the deep-seated cultural issues that need to be addressed, need to become a talking point. In India, this has kick-started a national conversation. 80% of men in India think all household tasks are the job of the women before this video came along. This video is changing that. There are 3 million men who on their own have signed a petition now committing themselves to equality at home. This has started a national conversation. Our brands can do that. That's what we're doing.
So thank you. I'm going to get the second person up, but your video has raised a number of issues. First of all, it does bleed into the panel, bleed backwards into the panel right before us, but also it raises the issue of generational change, which is something I'd like to address when you're all three of you back on the stage. So I would like you to, I'm not sure, the organizers, does he stay, can you stay on, or do we, off with you?
I'll be back.
And Lisa, we have Lisa Jackson from Apple Inc.
We kicked him out.
So Lisa, obviously you have a top position at Apple. I mean, could any company be changing our lives any more than Apple? Can you talk to us a little bit about what you do in your role? And in particular, issues like the one you were telling me in the back about the touch screen and how that made you think about what needed to be done for a wider population.
Sure. I joined Apple 4 years ago, and I, before that, ran the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I went to Apple because environment is my life's passion, and I was trying to decide where I could pursue that passion with real impact. And I believe, to the title of this session, that business, and for me, Apple was the one place that I could see making a difference and using our ecosystem and our customers and everyone to make a difference. I run environment for the company, environmental initiatives, so there are people all over the company engaged in the work, but we sort of have a place where all that work comes together. I also run our government affairs work, but I also run what we call social initiatives, things that are part of the work we do, part of our values. Tim Cook, our CEO, has been really vocal about the idea that companies should have values. They should stand for something in the world. And I think Apple's roots have always been we make the world's best products, but we make them to empower people to make the world better. That's the belief, that you make something that's so wonderful to use that people use it and they live their best selves, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's engagement, whether it's politics. And so we also do work around accessibility. The story I was telling Alessandra in the back is that, as you might imagine, when we move towards a touch screen for smartphones, so of course the iPhone's coming out, many people who are disabled or advocates for the disabled community, especially the blind or low vision community, said, you mean to tell me we're going to move from a keyboard to a piece of glass? And how is that going to be accessible for people who are disabled? And Steve Jobs took that to heart. And there were actually some engineers in the company who had family members or personal disabilities, and they took this challenge to heart. And as a result, decided, actually, let's not make the hardware accessible. Let's make the operating system, the software accessible. That way, once you do it once, every time you buy a new piece of hardware, whether it's a Mac or a portable, like a phone or an iPad, that's accessible too. So that's why the iPhone today is actually the most used assistive device for the blind in the world, because it has speak screen, it has voiceover, which can speak for you, and it Siri from very early on could recognize voice commands. And so I actually think the challenge of making the best product and one that is inclusive leads to solutions. It's the fun part of my job. For sure.
So you were previously in government. How does an American company operate within a country that seems to be, let's say, not as enthusiastic about certain environmental global accords?
The company that I work for, Apple, has been incredibly vocal, like many in the tech sector. I'm not going to say this is an Apple-only thing, but many sectors and many business leaders in the U.S. have said, no, actually, we don't agree. We believe that addressing climate change, stepping up to the responsibility, it's more than the right thing to do. It is in our business interest to think about a future where transportation changes as a result of climate change and urbanization. Big factors that if you're not looking at, you sort of have blinders on for your business. Whenever I speak, I end up talking about the business advantage of looking at climate change, and it's really important to know that we're not operating a charity. We're a business. Our shareholders expect us to have a return on investment. Apple is 96% renewable around the world. Our data centers run on 100% clean energy. And just to drive that home, if you're sending an iMessage right now or you're FaceTiming later on an Apple device, you're not adding any carbon to the atmosphere because those are running on renewable energy. A huge technological challenge, but also we decided to do it and not have it cost us extra. So sometimes we develop our own projects so that we can get the return on investment we want to see from an energy perspective. So I just think that business has a huge role to play. I don't think it can replace government, and I don't think that's what we're trying to say. We certainly remain hopeful and have made it clear to the Trump administration that we believe we need to be part of the worldwide effort to tackle this worldwide problem.
Just the last question, but the one difficulty, obviously such a big global company, one of the difficulties presumably is monitoring your supply chain around the world. This is obviously an issue not just for you, for many companies. Now, as we were saying before, there's a big debate about electric vehicles, for example, and what goes into an electric vehicle and whether the most environmentally sound, supposedly, vehicle is actually not so environmentally sound. So how do you, to the best of your ability, monitor your supply chains?
I think we run probably the world's best supply chain monitoring and responsibility program. Part of that is because our sector, the electronic sector, over time, people have asked a lot of questions about what's in, my device. I love it, but what harm is it causing? Are people being treated fairly and is the environment being harmed? So yes, we audit and we visit factories. One of the things I'm proudest of is in the past year, 2 years ago, we promised to turn our suppliers to clean energy. We now have 8 suppliers, some of our biggest, who've 100% moved to clean energy or have promised to in the next year or so. We've promised to put 4 gigawatts of new clean energy together with them in a partnership on the grid. That's happening as we speak. We're ahead of schedule. We promised by 2020 we'd like our whole supply chain to be 100% renewable. But I think the answer is in doing what we did with accessibility, looking at that challenge to business, which is fair. More and more people want to understand that the supply chain is green, that it's ethical, and saying, how do I innovate to that solution? And one of the things we've come to the conclusion on is that the circular economy for us is more than an environmental issue. We know, and we've set a goal for ourselves to make our products from 100% recycled or renewable material. And part of the reason for that is that we believe that's the best way to know what the supply chain is, which is we know the exacting standards we have for material. If we're recycling that material and using it to create the next iPhone, that's the best sourcing there is. So I think you have to find innovation. I think you have to find ways to make it clear to the supply chain that if you're not going to get your act together, we're moving on. And when clean energy, our stand has been, we'll work with you to get to clean energy, but if after some period of time you won't do that, then we need to find suppliers.
Has
who
that
will.
happened in the 4 years you've been at Apple?
The Supplier Clean Energy Program started 2 years ago. We have, like I said, 8 folks committed 100%. We have hundreds in the pipeline. And, we could have just said we'll only work with people who can do clean energy, but then you're not transforming anything. You're just competing with someone to buy, cleaner sources. And I do think the transformation's happening. And I actually think people want to do it for the same reasons we talked about. This is where the world is going. I don't want to be left behind.
And in your in your time at Apple, has there been any missteps that you have had to deal with, and that Apple never makes any missteps? Any missteps that have allowed the company to change course and be better?
Yeah, sure. The thing I love the most about Apple is that innovation is actually what drives the company. And so we occasionally challenge ourselves to do things and come up with solutions that may or may not be the right one. And what's great about sort of our whole sector, but Apple in particular, is that it's a culture that's about figuring out the lesson and moving on. The whole cliche about failing fast in Silicon Valley. I think we're trying to bring that to the environment, to accessibility, to education solutions. We didn't have time to talk about, but I know we will later. We've had times where we thought we knew the answer, but it wasn't. The key is learning from that and moving on.
You raised something that I have to jump on, because Silicon Valley, not necessarily on environmental or social affairs, but on other affairs, including gender affairs, is not exactly a world leader. I mean, what does Apple try to do as sort of the leading company in the sector? Because the world knows that there are other companies in Silicon Valley, and in fact that the culture of Silicon Valley is not particularly sort of forward-looking, especially when it comes to gender.
Our numbers, I think, are better than some, but certainly, I see friends in the audience who I know have been working on this issue for a long time. I think it's incumbent on all of us to continue to move forward. I happen to work for a CEO in Tim Cook who believes strongly that the future of our company depends on changing the network in Silicon Valley, because we have huge blind spots if we don't. It's not surprising that a lot of the software that comes out of Silicon Valley, for instance, seems to appeal to a certain demographic. It's been driven by that. So I think whether it's, we had Michelle Obama at one of our, I got to interview Michelle Obama on stage. And she sat there and I said, okay, here are all the developers for all the apps in the world. What do you want to tell them about women? And she said, who do you think is making the decision about what to buy? That is true. That is still true. Whether we're washing clothes or not, we're making decisions about it. And so I think it is our job to be that voice. I am fortunate enough to be in a position where I can use my voice and speak up and talk about things that I don't think are right or things that we need to change. And fortunate enough to have a boss who says, okay, now, the only problem with that is he turns around and says, okay, you're going to do something about it, or we're just going to talk about it. So that's the work.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll have our next panelist come up, and that's Antoine Frérot from Veolia. Thank you very much, Lisa. We'll get you back in a few minutes. So we have the local here now.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, same question to you. I mean, can you give us a sense of what Veolia does? Veolia touches many other companies' lives, obviously, and in a way should be the sort of company that sets the example on these issues. I mean, our water supply is possibly the most precious thing that we have. What are the things that your company does in particular in this front?
To deal with environmental issues, that is the business of Veolia. And we see our mission as we say, resourcing the world, meaning giving access to the resources, protecting the resources, and creating also new resources. Then Veolia creates solutions for treating all type of pollution, and especially the most difficult ones to treat. Solutions also for solving scarcity issues. I will I will give you some examples, but also solution for allowing population, including the poorest part of this population, to benefit from essential services linked to water, waste management, or energy. Some examples, if you wish. I will take them. I will take examples where we make possible the companies which produce consumer goods to product them and to protect the planet. The first example is linked with water scarcity. The company Nestlé in Mexico operates a big plant which produces milk powder. They need water for operating this plant. And one day, because of conflict with the population around the plant, they were no more allowed to extract water from nature. So they asked us a solution. They receive milk from cows. They transform this milk into milk powder. We were able to extract the water to separate the milk to make milk powder and the water. And now this factory is working only with this milk, making it, I think, the first factory in the world, a zero extraction water factory. Another example about how to make circular economy happen. A good example for Lisa, for example. In the electronic equipment, in your computer, in your iPhone, you likely know that there is a lot of precious metals and also rare earths. Perhaps you are not knowing that in 1 kilogram of this electronic waste, there is more gold than in a kilogram of a very good gold mine. So it is very interesting to extract this gold, but it is difficult. And in Germany, we built a factory which now extracts all these precious metals and rare earths to be recycled for be used for building or manufacturing new equipment. So I will be very happy to show to you that, Lisa.
You could do a joint venture, melt your iPhone
Yes,
and make yourself a gold ring.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely. So that is two examples for some industrial big companies. We have also example for ourselves. For example, to fight against carbon emission, we decided to use an internal carbon price for selecting our investment and project in the company. 30 euros per ton for carbon emission. And with this price, we integrate already, even if it's not the case in the regulation, as you know, or in the legislation, we integrate the case that we need to take care of this emission, and we are able to put a cost on the pollution. And I think it will be necessary to give a cost to the pollution to be able to work in a cleaner way.
Just on that note, in which countries is, as a result of what you said, the cost of doing business highest? Or let me put it another way, in which countries does your business work better? And according to everything that you said, in which countries is it harder? If you can say.
I presume you will be surprised if I answer China. And it is the case.
China being the easiest one and the best one?
Yes.
And why so?
Because today, for China, the biggest limiting factors to continue their industrial development and their growth is environmental issues. The biggest issue with population protestations are coming from environmental issues. And the Chinese authority know that if they are not able to solve these issues, they will be forced to stop their economic development and their urbanization. It is why, for example, last year, they put in place stronger industrial wastewater regulation for water release in the nature, which is much stronger than what we have in Europe, for example. It is the same for hazardous waste treatment. It will come for plastic recycling. And for sure, in the future, it will come also for carbon emission. You know, it is not possible for a dense population in big vertical cities to continue any development or any living in a completely polluted environment. So it is why it is the most strong growth we enjoy there in China, more than in Europe and much more than in North America.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you. We're just about wrap. Actually, we have 2 more minutes for you. And I asked this question because I do believe that often the missteps that one makes often teach more than the successes. So, Veolia, what are the more challenging issues that you have faced in your time? What are the missteps that you have had to manage, if any, and how?
I will choose a good memory to answer you, if possible. I remember one day in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, the natural water in the aquifer are naturally polluted by arsenic. So, in the rural areas, the population could no more use this water if they want to avoid to become ill. And the water in the rivers are not with arsenic, but also with pollution. With Professor Mohamed Yunus, we built a social business with the women of the rural areas of this country, and we built a way to treat the water coming from rivers to distribute safe water. Unfortunately, the business model was wrong, and it was not sustainable for this population. With the help of an anthropologist and also the help of the population itself, the women there, we found with them a new business model, putting this safe water in bottle, and this rural population now is selling these water bottles in the capital city, Dhaka, in Bangladesh. And with this business, it makes globally the things sustainable, I mean economically and financially sustainable. So from a first good idea with Professor Yunus, we have been able to transform with the help of the population itself in the concept of social business to build something now is working and make safe water distribution possible for this very poor population.
Great, thank you. Okay, if I could ask the other panelists to come back up. A first round of applause, for.
Lisa, don't forget my card.
We have a joint venture in the making. I think all of us, though, should get a cut out of any future profits from this business. In this next session, I would like to look to the future and to say, from your experiences, what global business still has not done. And Lisa, you said, nothing can take the place of governments, and clearly in regulation and policy and overall diplomatic and political leadership, that is true. On the other hand, businesses are far more transnational, global, operate across global borders. The responsibility, I would say, is equally on the corporations of the world, and the corporations are bigger than many countries whose annual profits and certainly annual revenue and certainly market cap are bigger than some countries. So I'd like to look to the future and to say what global business still needs to do in order to be leaders in social and environmental initiatives. And that includes education for a new generation, and that includes filling the gap that government can't, but while making profit, otherwise you go out of business. Now, I don't know whether it's true, and just to say whether, when I used to live in France many years ago, there was a sense that somehow profitability went against was in contradiction with a social good. I don't know whether that is still the case, but I feel that companies still have to convince the world that is not the case. So the questions to you are, what are you doing to look for the future, and what does global business generally still have to do? And I want you to be very honest about what you still have not achieved and what business has to achieve. Gary, let's begin with you. What are the two, say, most important things that global companies still need to do to bring us into the future? Being very honest about the lacunas that still exist.
It's a great question, and if I may, I'll say that I don't think it's something that corporations need to engage on in order to make progress on social and environmental issues. I think it's something in today's world that if corporations don't do, they won't exist. I mean, it's fundamentally important, and I'm not sure all the corporations around the world have internalized that yet. And I don't think it's any surprise that the public trust in corporations, just like the public trust in government bodies, is at a all-time low, 100-year low. So what still needs to be done? I think if I speak for the consumer goods industry, it's absolutely vital that we accelerate the progress on sustainability and being in tune with the environment. I mean, we are a consumer goods company. We create consumer goods. It's vital that we do that in a way that is neutral to the environment. I'll say again, a big part of that isn't just about what we do, it's also about what our consumers do with our products. So there's our own manufacturing system, there's our own raw material supply, incredibly important, but the brands also have to communicate to their users. And for example, 85% of the environmental impact of laundry detergents is the temperature you wash at. Persuading consumers to reduce the wash temperature is incredibly important for the environment. We've had a lot of success in that regard, but tackling things like that. Another example is people are sorting their waste in the kitchen typically now, but many of my products get thrown away in the bathroom where waste is typically not sorted. Another thing that one of our hair care brands is embracing. So environmental concerns are, I think, the most important, and I think there's much that we still need to do.
But what is it that P&G can, is there a goal that you have set yourself, say, over the next 2 or 5 or 10 years to really transform your behavior and consumer behavior? What is your hope over the next, say, 5 years? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years?
Yeah, we have, in aggregate, corporate environmental goals. I touched on some of them before. 30% reduction in greenhouse gases, zero waste to landfill from our plants, and a whole suite of others. And they're important. But there is no doubt that the biggest positive impact we can make is using our brands to communicate with our consumers. And from a social issue point of view, using those brands as a voice for good. And from an environmental point of view, helping consumers use our brands in a responsible way. Mm-hmm. Those are both incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, obviously you're a consumer good as well. What are you doing for the future?
Consumer great. So listen, I want to go piece by piece, but really quickly. So on the environment, we purposely said our goal is not carbon neutrality, it's to whack and defeat climate change as a problem for the world. So what that means is, yes, we can get to 100% renewable. Great companies are doing great things, but we're working in our supply chain, so we want everyone in our supply chain 100% renewable. because those are hundreds and thousands of businesses around the world who would see the path to bringing clean energy into their business model. So we're very big on that. So that's a big goal for us. Our second big goal is to make our products out of recyclable and renewable materials. And we believe the sector needs to change to do the same. But we believe Apple can be investing in the technologies that allow us to do that. Because actually getting the precious metals is great, but there's actually a market for them. You know, we need to make a market for recycled tantalum, recycled tin, which we now use in our iPhone 6 solder. It's all recycled tin. So we are trying to move all of our phones to that. We need to make markets where those materials that have been recycled in the circular economy have as much value or more than material that comes from the ground.
But do you work with companies like Veolia then? I mean,
Absolutely, we have to, absolutely. And we have been, and we talked in the green room about other projects. But we also have to work with...
I'm sensing it. I mean, honestly, we all really need a cut from this.
Accessibility, our products still can be even more accessible. And I think we're on the edge of what new connections in terms of augmented reality will do to make communication easier for people who may have challenges to communicate because of a physical disability, for example. I think we're just starting to touch that. It's really exciting. And the last thing I just want to say is that if I had to wrap it up in one plea, I think we have more to do as the private sector on human rights, particularly lifting up women and girls, particularly insisting that that is a fight for business to have that's as important as any issue that we use our voice on.
You know, your two consumer brands, you know, I don't know what they make up together, but a huge amount. I just want to ask the audience, if I'm allowed, for the show of hands, how many of the people in the audience, I'm assuming everybody uses or at some point has used an iPhone or a Procter Gamble project? That wasn't the question. I assume that you do. Of those that do, how many of you consider these two brands to be leading on environmental and social issues? And with this question, it's because the brand is very important. I'm just curious, because clearly these two companies do a lot. How many of you see it as such? Sorry? Yes. Oh, okay. Good point. Yes. Okay. I wasn't going to go so deep, but Procter & Gamble. Okay. And Apple. So this raises the question: is it a communications issue, or is there truly more to be done? And hand on heart, you know what? Because clearly what you're telling us is that it seems like you've done a lot. What is the problem then? What seems to be the gap between the perception and what you're doing, or is it a reality? Sorry, I put you on the spot now, but I mean, you've talked to us. This is why I wanted to get what you do. You clearly do a lot, both of you, and in the company. So where is the gap here?
I think it reveals an interesting point, and obviously I can only speak for P&G. Lisa will talk to Apple in a minute. The sort of progress we've made doesn't come around because we started thinking about this last year or the year before. We've been around 180 years, and for a lot of that time, we've been working on the environmental impact of our brands. It's only more recently that we've started talking about that. We've started talking about it more recently because, we are a very connected company with consumers. Our brands are sold to 5 billion consumers around the world. We have a lot of consumer insights. And whilst environment has been on the agenda of, forgive me because I'm probably one as well, liberal elites for a while, mass consumers in the world, this hasn't been a big issue. But it's progressively becoming a big issue now. And that's why in my opening remarks, and I'll repeat it, this is not a, how do we address this issue as a bolt-on? Unless we address these issues and talk about them, it's fundamental to our business future. So I think as well as doing good, it's incumbent upon us to communicate those things as well. And that's still work to do.
Lisa, I mean, just the fact that you are at Apple should be a sign that this is important. But, but yet there seems to be a gap.
Yeah, I think some of it is that we didn't spend a lot of time leading with the message on sustainability or environment. And frankly, we struggle a lot to make sure we're not sounding like we're just greenwashing our work. We do really substantive work. People, you know, I'll disagree slightly. People have really high expectations for Apple. They like the brand because they believe that we're doing something really smart, and we drive the details, and we drive all the way down to, you know, the kinds of details you never see. And they expect from Apple a lot. And we have to live up to that, and we have to lead in a world where there's a lot of noise in the system. And I thought for a long time that customers, that people, forget about customers. When I was at the EPA, I felt like they don't know who to believe anymore. Everyone is up there, and I can name companies that I know aren't very green at all, but if you saw their commercial, you would swear they're doing all kinds of wonderful things for the climate. So I think there's a little of that. I want to say two things. We're up to 14 companies that have pledged to do 100% renewable in our supply chain. I announced just 2 weeks ago and forgot an additional 6 companies. So we're getting there, and it will move on. And honestly, for the next generation, for the folks, young people who love our products, we know that they expect it. It's almost, you know, it's the price of getting their loyalty and their business, that they expect companies to lead on these sets of issues that my colleagues are talking about.
What can your sector do more of? Water, you know, waste management.
I think the biggest challenge, which is today preventing companies to take a better stance, is what you reminded us some minutes ago when you say that in some cases there is some contradiction between profitable businesses and take care of environmental and social issues. Why are there these contradictions? Because all the consequences of the businesses are not taking into account in the prices, what the academics are calling externalities. We need to put a cost on the pollution. We need to make polluters pay, and we need to do that polluting is more expensive than non-polluting. It is the case for all type of pollution, especially for carbon emission, with a real carbon tax, where the money will be collected to be redistributed to help the depolluter. I think we will have much easier way to take a stance. And even if the regulation or the legislation is not existing today for that, because it is the case, I think the key is that the companies, businesses must act voluntarily and do as if this constraint would have existed. And if they are doing that, the biggest companies around the world, progressively, they will show examples. And with the help of all of you, we will get one day the appropriate regulation and legislation to have a much better taking into account of environmental and social issues.
Great, thank you. I think you raise a very good point at the end of this session, is that to a certain extent, as much as many would not like to maybe acknowledge it, it is a partnership. Because just as you perhaps can do better with your bottles of shampoo, we can do better at putting at 0 degrees or 20 degrees as opposed to 60 degrees for our washing. And clearly there seems to be a disconnect between everybody has an iPhone, and how is it that everybody buys an iPhone, but then perhaps there's a perception that Apple doesn't do enough. Clearly, if consumers really felt that, maybe they shouldn't buy iPhones, but they do. So perhaps there's a disconnect there. And clearly, the issue of a wider appreciation that pollution has a cost in the long term is something that perhaps still has to pervade our societies as much as the global elite might be talking about it. Perhaps not everybody does. So with that, I want to close the session. Thank you very much. I realize I put some of you on the spot for a bit, and you were really remarkable. Thank you very much.